great. Thank you. Welcome. So my name is Catherine Lee. I am the Director of Ruler for Families. My background is in early childhood education and development. And I've been an educator, a lead administrator of a school, and perhaps most importantly, I'm the mom of a 29-year-old son who lives in California.
There he is. And I'm Elisa Ladati, and I work with Catherine at the Center for Emotional Intelligence, developing resources for families. And I also work with school teams to implement Ruler, which is our approach to social and emotional learning. My background is as a school psychologist, and I've worked in public school settings, grades K through 12. And as you can tell from my basement office / playroom, I am the mom of 2 young boys. We'd like to find out a little bit more about you, so we'll start a poll just to find out what your role is and a little bit more about who we have with us today. You can pick more than one option. Ashton, would you be able to start that poll?
Yes. Hold on one second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
how would you describe yourself? Parent, caregiver, teacher, school administrator, district administrator, mental health professional. Yeah, almost everybody.
So I'm noticing this adds up, well, and I'm not the best at math, but I'm looking at it and it adds up to more than 100. So it seems like some of you are maybe parents and caregivers and also educators in the school or mental health professionals. We have, maybe close to half parents and caregivers, as well as a number of educators and district leaders. Great.
Okay, well, seemingly overnight, families and educators have had to adapt on the fly to major changes in how we live and work. And more than likely, you and your household have been on a roller coaster of emotions as you try to sort out what to do with all these changes. And as the adults in the family, not only are you trying to manage your own emotions, but you're also trying to carry the load for the rest of the people in your household. So in order to understand how our kids are feeling, we need to know, like, how can we begin to initiate some of those conversations, especially if we're not so accustomed to having them? And how can we also, as a part of that, help them build their own inner resources? So it begins with a conversation. And in this workshop, we will explore how to deepen our own self-awareness through the ruler skills, so that we can better understand ourselves, have better conversations with our kids, and hopefully, in some ways, transform this pandemic into at least an opportunity to come out the stronger on the other side. So, but before we begin, we'd like to find out a little bit more about how you are feeling.
So take a moment and check in with yourself. You can share in the chat box just a little bit about what emotions you're experiencing right now.
Yeah, I have this poll thing up. Yeah, so just pause, check in with you may have thoughts, lots of things that you were doing before you came. So how are you feeling? What kinds of thoughts have been going on? And how can you best bring yourself here to be fully present while we're all together? A little overwhelmed, concerned, sadness, tired, anxious. Happy to learn, tired. Yeah, curious, calm. I think, yeah, inability to focus. I think a lot of people are feeling tired. I was hearing that even this morning from people. Anxious. So, okay. I think we're all dealing with a lot. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to be here. So we're going to actually launch our webinar with a great teacher who happens to be 10. His name is Jacob. And so he is going to share with us first thing in the morning, checking in on the mood meter. And that should really kind of lay the foundation for what we're going to be exploring here together.
Hi, my name is Jacob, and I was asked to talk about the mood meter. So I'm going to tell you about how my mom is very stressed. So usually in the mornings, I'm just sleeping in, but I can hear my mom down here just walking around, taking her big breaths in and out. And I don't like it. I don't like it when my parents are stressed. So usually, you can see this mood meter right here. My mom would probably be in between probably these three colors right here. Definitely not green because she's not calm, because she's got to be in a lot of meetings because of this whole virus. And I will say that definitely when my mom is in those colors, that I'm in those colors too. That's it.
We really want to thank his mom for being willing to share this with us. And yeah, it's just a perfect setup for our conversation.
Yeah, I know for me, Jacob really gets it. I'm feeling a lot of those things as well, and he gave a great introduction to the mood meter. I'm just going to give a little bit more detail about what the mood meter is and how it works. I noticed from the information we got when people registered, about half of you joining us today haven't been trained in ruler, but may have seen the mood meter. So the mood meter is a tool that helps us to be aware of how we are feeling and how the people around us are feeling. It shows that emotions have two dimensions, pleasantness and energy. And so the horizontal line refers to pleasantness, which is our internal and subjective experience. It's about how pleasant are our thoughts, ranging from extremely unpleasant all the way on the far end to the left, to neutral somewhere in the middle, to the most pleasant we've ever felt all the way on the right. And energy is that vertical line. It's how much energy do we feel in our minds and bodies, ranging from extremely low to extremely high. And so we might think about energy as how warm or cold our body is, how quickly thoughts are moving through our mind, how fast our heart is beating. And where those two lines intersect, they form four quadrants. So the top right, that red quadrant, or the top left, that red quadrant, is for high energy, unpleasant emotions like rage, anxiety, fear, or frustration. The blue quadrant contains feelings like disappointment, sadness, depression, those low energy, unpleasant emotions. The yellow is for high energy, pleasant emotions like happiness, joy, or elation. And the green is for low energy, but pleasant emotions, contentment, calm, relaxation, and serenity. So the mood meter is, it can be used with all different ages, ranging from really early childhood all the way through adulthood. And so as children are learning about the mood meter, it really helps to make emotions more concrete as something we can visualize and feel in our bodies. So these are some examples of mood meters at different levels. And the one on the left is from an early childhood setting, and starts with really focusing in on one emotion word per quadrant and then expanding on that. So my younger son is 2. With him, I'm really focusing on angry for the red quadrant, happy for yellow, sad for blue, and calm for green, and connecting what he's feeling in his body, what's going on around us, with those 4 quadrants and 4 emotion words. As kids get older, we try to develop a more nuanced and rich emotion vocabulary. So with my older son, he's 6. I might dig a little deeper and try to distinguish between emotion words. So he might say something, and he often says, "I'm really red. I'm scared. I'm in the red." And what I'm finding is that if I ask another question, like, "Are you worried? Are you afraid because something is gonna hurt, or you're in danger, or are you just a little anxious or uncertain because you're not sure about what's happening next?" And as children get older, really the focus is on building a nuanced emotion vocabulary, on exploring why we're feeling the way we're feeling, how to express those feelings, and what we could do to work with those feelings in helpful ways. And ultimately, build the strategies to independently regulate emotions. Catherine, you're muted.
Sorry. So Lisa just described how to use the mood meter, and I'd just like to talk a little bit about the spirit with which we use it. So the idea really is that as human beings, we have a full wide range of emotions, and that it's healthy to have a full range of emotions. It's part of what makes us feel alive. And um, so our work is really founded on the idea that we have emotions for a reason, and that our emotions are signals. So even unpleasant emotions such as anger or fear provide us with important information. So it may be providing us with, like, fear may be there's an impending danger, anger may be like there's an injustice going on. So it's a window not only to what's going on in our environment, but it can also, like, our emotions can tell us a lot about what we deeply value, or our view, our beliefs about things, or even our histories, our own personal histories, and what we've learned. So when we're smart about our emotions, we're able to bring that emotional awareness together with our ability to be reasonable. And it's that integration that is really has to do with emotional intelligence and being smart about our emotions. So, so one thing that I just wanted to say before we just launch a little bit deeper in terms of the spirit is that one of the key understanding, one of the building blocks of ruler is understanding. And in order to begin to understand, if you have the idea that all emotions are not okay, that some of them are bad, it makes it hard to accept yourself. And if you are not able to accept yourself, then it's going to be harder to let certain emotions come up and then to be able to look at them. So that willingness to just be with your feelings for a little bit can be really helpful, and combined with a curiosity, like, I wonder why I'm feeling that way. I'd like to take a look at that. So we don't do that if something is happening in the moment and we need to respond quickly. But normally, most of us could probably just develop that capacity to reflect a little bit more about what we're experiencing and why. And when we don't, we're at risk that those unexplored emotions, those emotions that we're pushing away or pushing down, can actually have a lot of power over us. So self-awareness and self-understanding also help deepen and strengthen our relationships. So, sorry. So there's a quote that the director of our center said, Mark Brackett, that we like so much, and I'm just going to read it to you. To truly know how we or someone else is feeling, we need to go deeper. It's rarely simple. Real understanding begins when we ask the question, why do you or I feel this way? Usually, asking one question will lead to more, like peeling the layers of an onion. No wonder it's scary. Once we start asking, there's no turning back. So I'd just like to ask you right here, just quickly in the chat box, does it seem scary to you? And what part of having these conversations might feel a little bit scary? just go ahead and you can just write some of your responses in the chat box. Being vulnerable, vulnerability, not scary, comfortable, feeling sad is, yeah. So seeing vulnerable, insecure, uncomfortable, the unknown can be scary. Learning the truth can be hard. Some people say it doesn't really scare them, but it can still be hard. Okay. Loss of control can be painful. Okay. Yeah, fear to go deeper. Okay. Yeah, lots of feelings about all of this. So well, let's just explore it a little bit further. So yeah, some of it, like people are pointing out, like the pain reveals needing to change. So, and then sometimes change is scary, and all of it. So let's just there's been this theme also coming up a lot about not knowing, and I guess that's probably amplified by these times that we're in right now of just so much not knowing. But here we are. So if we believe that emotions are valid, and we know also that emotions come and go, that can be grounding, and that can just kind of help us settle in a little bit to begin the conversation. And that can help us maybe feel a little bit calmer when we have those unsettled feelings about what's unknown, or what might be difficult to hear. So when you are able to reflect on your emotions in constructive ways, you really are a role model for your kids, and you help them reflect on their emotions in constructive ways. And these conversations that we're having with ourselves and the words that we're using with our children really become their own inner voice. And also, when you consider how you're helping set up that inner voice, you realize that these conversations that we're having with our children can really be one of the most loving gifts that we give to them. So I hope that some of those thoughts can just help you get started with the conversation. And yeah, because we really are children's first teachers. So the conversation can begin with a simple question: how are you feeling? And then, why are you feeling that way? Can you tell me more? And so it does take courage and a willingness to suspend your judgment if you really want your kids to feel safe sharing with you. So, so let's just begin. We often think about ruler, R-U-L-E-R, in terms of clumping like R-U-L together and then E-R together. So with recognizing, before we just jump in, and I'm going to just kind of give a sample conversation, it's important to remember that our feelings are really grounded in our bodies. And so we can really help our kids when they're young by helping them just pay attention to what's going on in their bodies. So something that we say often is that both parents and lots of times teachers might say, calm down. But when children don't really know what calm feels like in their body to begin with, then they don't also quite know how to get there. So on the other hand, if when they're calm and you're all calm together, you can just make a comment like, wow, I love how this feels in my body. Just, I feel loose and free, or whatever it might be. So bringing some awareness to the body is really going to help your kids begin to be more aware of what they're feeling in a given moment. So recognizing. So I'm just going to kind of make up a scenario of let's say it's a girl and she's in early elementary school. So, and I'm going to do RUL, and they might not be completely in sequence. Yeah, I've noticed that you've been putting your head down while you're working on this school project here, and the corners of your mouth seem turned down a little bit. I'm just wondered what's going on. What's happening? Where would you say you are in the mood meter? Seems like kind of low energy, so maybe it's in the blue, would you say? Um, okay, I see. So you're saying, yeah, you're saying that this assignment is really hard and you wish you had your teacher. Yeah, I can understand. Um, hmm. Yeah. So, well, what feeling would you say you have? Like if you're here and you're saying you're here in the blue, would you say you're feeling sad? Would you say you're feeling disappointed? Or are you miserable? Are you discouraged? Miserable. Okay, so you feel miserable. And okay, so let's go on. So we're going to move on now to expressing and regulating. So is there something that you'd like to do with that feeling? Would you like to write a note to your teacher? I'd be happy to help you if you'd like to do that. Um, and I want to add that one part of expressing is sort of knowing, time and place. And this is one of the most complex skills, which Elisa will talk about a little bit more. But sometimes there's wisdom also in knowing when not to express. So that's a way that you can coach your child. But so you might say, so would you like me to help you write a note, and maybe we can see if we can get some help from the teacher? Okay. Well, what might help you feel a little bit better right now? Do you want to just sit with your feelings for a little bit? Would you like to shift into another activity, like maybe just something that fits your mood better, like drawing or reading a book or listening to a little music before you get back to it? Or would you like to shift? Would you like to feel different? Because I was just thinking like maybe we could go for a walk around the block. Maybe we could put on some dance music. So what do you think? What would you like? What would be most supportive of you right now? So that's kind of the regulating part of the conversation. If you're with an adolescent, it's going to sound a little bit different. So you don't want your teenager to feel like you're interrogating them. It might just be something much more simple like this, like, hey, I've noticed that you've been kind of laying on the bed quite a bit today. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Yeah, I just wondered if you're doing okay. Is there, how would you say, yeah, where are you on the mood meter? Uh-huh, I see. Yeah, is there any way that I can support you? Anything that maybe we can do together? I was just getting ready to go for a walk around the block. Would you like to go with me? Maybe we could just walk and talk for a little bit. So something like that, that's a little bit more low key. And again, your child, your child's temperament, you have your own relationship with them, and you have your own way of communicating in your family. So you can take this as a framework and then find your way within it. But I would say also, which is one thing that I want to mention, for example, with a child any age, but maybe particularly with a teenager, is if it's going on for a long time, if somebody's in the blue for a long time, then it is really important to have that conversation, and you need to kind of get underneath what's happening.
So as Catherine mentioned, Ruler, that RULER, is a framework, and you're going to bring your own style, your voice, the language you want to use to that conversation. But there's some things to keep in mind that I think are really important. And that first thing is just to be open and curious. As Catherine mentioned earlier, curiosity is about exploring. It's about wanting to know more and not judging once we do know. It's an expression of openness and caring, and that's what helps us to feel close to one another. So ask those open-ended questions and listen deeply. And listening means more than just waiting for your turn to talk or being quiet when someone else is talking. It's about putting our own opinions, our assumptions, our beliefs on hold and being patient. It's listening to the words that are being said and what's left unsaid. And when we summarize and we paraphrase, it gives our children an opportunity to clarify. And that acknowledges and validates how they're feeling. And I know for me, when somebody says something like, so what you're saying is, and then they get it right, I really feel heard and understood. And even if they didn't get it right, but they're open to learning more, then I really believe that they care. And so the point is, take time to fully explore so you understand what emotions are being felt. And Catherine turned me on to a psychologist, Dr. Kenneth Barish, and he says it so well. So I'm just going to read what he says because I don't think I could say it any better. He says, children learn to express their emotions in constructive ways when they're confident that their feelings will be heard. When a child expects that her feelings will be appreciated and understood, her emotions become less urgent because each frustration and disappointment now feels less painful, less catastrophic. She'll be less insistent in her demands and more open and flexible to seeking solutions to problems. So even when we think we're done, it's never a bad idea to ask just one more question before we move on to problem solving. And those questions might be, can you tell me more? And particularly for teens and adolescents, do you genuinely feel like I understand and appreciate your point of view? Is there anything else that I need to know? And Catherine mentioned a little bit about expressing our emotions. And so I think it's important to clarify a common misconception. Responding to and acknowledging all emotions doesn't mean that anything goes in terms of behavior. In every context, there are rules, there are expectations and norms about how we show our emotions and how we express them. And we can help our children and adolescents learn about the impact and recognize the impact that the way that they're expressing their emotions has on other people so that they can make wiser decisions on what to do with their feelings. And ultimately, build the skills of knowing how and when to express their feelings and what to do to manage those feelings. And that's a process that occurs over the lifespan. You know, being able to skillfully show our emotions and change them or keep them if we want to is something that we're all continually learning to do and get better at. So what could these conversations sound like in real life? So I'm just gonna play a soundbite of myself and my older son. He's a little quiet and he was camera shy. He did not want to be in a video, but he said I could play the audio of just a minute of one of our conversations that we had just last week. So I'm gonna go ahead and play it and hopefully that works out okay.
What's going on? How you doing? Not good. Not good. Where do you think you are on the movie then? Can you show me? Here. Right there, like in the blue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How come? What do you think? What do you think is making you feel that way?
Because we can't go anywhere, and not that much people can come over. And if we're doing the birthday party right now, then there's only going to be the 4 or the 5. How many people are in playing there?
Yeah, we couldn't do your birthday party with your friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you haven't been able to see your friends, you were saying before, right?
I'm so sad because I can't do my school. And my school is my real school, the one I can go inside my school.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that was toward the end of a really challenging day. And we had talked about him missing friends and missing school a couple of times already. It was a much longer conversation than that. And it took a lot of time and a lot of affection to figure out what was driving some of the challenging behaviors that we were feeling and really understand how he was feeling a great sense of sadness and loss about a lot of things that were going on around him. And it took time, but we were able to make some plans of things we could do right in that moment, some things we could do differently long term. And I'll say that it was really hard to have those kinds of conversations around such painful kinds of feelings. And it's easy to get defensive. And I know for me, it's easy to get defensive when talking about feelings because it might be that I have to do something different or I'm not doing something as well as I could. It's really hard right now for everyone. And these conversations aren't easy and they don't always go perfectly. It's certainly not perfect for my family, but I really am valuing the opportunity to connect around how we're feeling during this time, to be a little vulnerable with my kids. And ultimately, my hope is that I'm showing them that they can come to me with how they're feeling, and trust that I'm going to really listen and do my best to help them. It's about practicing empathy, because it's our empathy that communicates that we understand, and it's our ability to bring ourselves to a calmer place and to stay emotionally regulated that communicates that it's safe to explore all kinds of emotions.
So I'm aware that actually most of the emotions that we've been exploring have been unpleasant ones, but I wanted to say that it's great to check in on the mood meter when you're, in the yellow or green also. So, just to notice, when you notice that you're feeling joyful or a sense of delight, just naming it can help you savor it a little bit more. And also emotions are contagious, so that affects that can affect everyone around you. So, so in addition to checking in about emotions when there are challenges or heightened emotions, we wanted to say that actually when you make check-ins, emotion check-ins a part of your regular routine, it really does promote structure and predictability, and it just makes it feel more like a part of your family culture. So we'd like to just explore a little bit about what are just great times for checking in. So one idea, and what a lot of people like to do, is sort of bookend their day. So they might start the morning by checking in first thing in the morning, maybe at breakfast. How are you feeling this morning? What's going on? Did you have any dreams? Are you ready for the day? What are your thoughts and feelings? And then often in the evening before we go to bed, sometimes those are just sort of more tender times. We're reflecting on our day. Kids tend to open up more in the evening. So bookending the day can be good. Let's see, there can also be when during transitions, when you're kind of moving from one activity to another, that's a natural time to check in. So some people like to do that, or have scheduled breaks. But what do you think? We'd love to hear from you. Just a few, if there are regular times that you check in, or your ideas about that. It'd be great to share that with everybody. So we'll just look and see what you have to say in the chat box.
At dinner, I see meal times. Dinner times is a key time for us as well. And before we start our schoolwork for the day as well. And I noticed somebody said, morning meetings.
Evening family walk is really nice. It's great. And at circle times at school. Yeah. Midday check-ins. Good. Happy hour. Great. Okay. Good. Thanks. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, so we've been saying this throughout throughout this webinar. It's been implicit, but it bears just making it very explicit that you really need to start with yourself. So before you can help your kids check in with themselves, do you actually find time to check in with yourself? And are you practicing your strategies and making time for self-care? So as we said before, our kids are really learning the skills of emotional intelligence every day through all of their interactions with you and what they're observing. You're their first and most enduring teachers. And that emotions are contagious. So however you're feeling is going to have an impact on your family and your kids. And also when we're aware of our feelings and moods, we're less likely to just react from that place. We can actually make choices and choose our words and say the kinds of things and make the kinds of decisions that we'd like to make. So just naming a feeling, actually there's research that just shows that simply naming your feeling then leads you to be more responsive and be able to make better decisions and be wiser about your feelings. So this next slide that we're going to look at is, hang on, let's just don't look at the slide quite yet. I just wanted to frame it first. So, so first of all, it's important for you to be taking care of yourself and really thinking about how am I attending to my mental health and to my basic needs like sleep, healthy food, and getting enough exercise and all the self-care. So now we're about to look at two slides that I think can be, that's why I didn't want to show them immediately. It can be a little bit jarring at first to see these two slides next to one another. So we're going to explore what is the difference between just kind of coping in unhelpful ways and then emotion regulation strategies. So first we're going to show unhelpful strategies. Everybody will see something about themselves on here that's hard to see, but here we go. We're all in this boat. Mostly unhelpful strategies. So the thing about unhelpful strategies is that they generally don't, they're just kind of default. They don't take a lot of energy. They're just immediate. They often don't really get to the core of solving the problem. And they're often just what we do because of what we have learned, and we fall into these certain kinds of patterns. So I don't know if you see any things in there that you recognize, but I think negative self-talk is a big one for a lot of people. And the more we can become aware of that and begin to talk to ourselves the way we would talk to a dear friend, it can make a really big difference in how we feel, our general moods, and it actually affects our whole families. Okay, so here's this list, you'll get it. And then these are mostly helpful strategies. And these strategies, these helpful strategies are really more about what we call emotion regulation. There are thought strategies and there are action strategies. And so thought strategies are going to have to do with positive self-talk, you know, what you say to yourself, reframing, which has to do with like, what is the story that I'm telling myself about what's going on? Can I appraise this in a different kind of way? You know, can I find some humor in this situation? Is there something here that I can feel grateful about? I know that a lot of people are doing that right now with this, you know, needing to be home. And other people, you know, may be more inclined toward, for example, spending time in nature. So the thing about thought strategies and action strategies that are helpful is that they actually, you have to be more intentional to really cultivate and do these. And yeah, they're not just necessarily automatic, but they really do help us with our long-term well-being and our health. And these are the kinds of strategies that we hope that we're modeling for our kids.
So I'm just putting this up there as a picture of a handout that you're going to receive after this webinar with the webinar recording. So don't worry about reading it or taking notes on it. I'm just going to zoom in on one of the quadrants to show you kind of how we went through and organized this handout. So we go through each quadrant and we talk about kind of some of the feeling words that are in the quadrant that might live there. What activities that this kind of emotional space is well suited towards, because as Catherine said, you know, all emotions, even unpleasant ones, can serve us in some situations. But if they're not, we talk about some strategies to shift out of that emotional space. So for example, if you're in the red and want to shift out, perhaps exercising or taking some deep breaths or using some positive self-talk, as Catherine mentioned, can be a strategy to shift out. We also wanted to talk about some other activities that you can use to integrate the mood meter at home and really make kind of talking about emotions and checking in on the mood meter a regular and natural process at home. The first that we talk about often is creating your own mood meters. The 4 squares are pretty easy to put together, so you can use construction paper or markers, or you can be creative and kind of reimagine what the mood meter might look like through art, and then display those around the home and use them to check in on. This might even be something you do on Zoom, on Facebook Live, on Google Meet with a group of other students, families, children. Music is one of my go-to strategies, and I really love an activity that we do in training, and I know educators use in their classroom, and that's making a playlist for each quadrant. So for example, what are 5 songs that evoke blue emotions or yellow or green? When might be a time that we use that playlist or those songs, and why do those songs bring up those kinds of emotions? That can be a starting point for some conversations, as well as a useful strategy. In addition to the Mood Meter handout that I just displayed on the slide earlier, we're also going to send some simple conversation starters and activities, and they're geared towards elementary school families. And it's supposed to be kind of a light touch to building social and emotional skills, things that you might do one a night at dinner or when you have some downtime. And they're organized into kindergarten, first grade, second, third, and fourth and fifth. For older kids, something that we hear sometimes is that the Mood Meter is too young or cutesy. And if that's the feel or the feedback that you might get from older children, it's important to focus in on skillfully expressing our emotions and what strategies we can use to stay in the space that we're in, stay in that emotion, or shift away. So something like a Mood Meter strategy journal or a list might be helpful. So as we're coming towards the end of our time together this afternoon, I wanted to leave you with this quote that I particularly love. Feelings are much like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which one to surf. We have emotions all the time, and they're going to keep coming just like waves. But when we understand how we're feeling, we can make wiser decisions about what to do with our emotions, which of those feelings to sit in and ride out. And we can help our children understand what to do with their emotions as well. It starts with asking that very first question: how are you feeling? And we hope the Mood Meter can be a tool that you use to continue that conversation and strengthen relationships at home.
So I just wanted to say that we are developing a new assessment tool. We have a whole group of researchers at our center. So we're both like practitioners and researchers. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about it. I'm just going to read what this researcher sent. So you can decide. Children and parents will participate in virtual research sessions via Zoom that we expect to last about an hour. This would begin in June. Children would be asked to pilot test an assessment which asks about which strategies they'd like to use to manage their emotions, in particular emotion situations at school. And then parents and children might be asked to complete a brief questionnaire about the children's emotion regulation. So, and participating families would receive a payment for participation, but we don't know how much yet. It'll be determined. And also you'll probably receive brief data reports about your child's motion regulation strategies, along with guidance on the benefits and drawbacks of certain strategies. So it sounds like a great opportunity where we are truly emotion scientists and learners. And so that information is here. And again, it will be, if you're interested, you can just email this email address that's here on the slide when you receive the whole webinar in a couple days. So let's see. So it looks like, do we have time for a couple questions?
Yeah, we have some time for questions. I recorded one from earlier when you guys were talking, but I want to first thank you guys so much for that presentation. Elisa and Catherine, it was really great sharing your insights. First question that we have, any other questions people have, you can also type them into the question and answer or into the chat box. But first one we have is, can the Mood Meter be used with the zones of regulation system?
Lisa can talk to that.
So I use zones often when in my practice in small group settings with students. And the zones, same colors, but they mean something slightly different. So it's about the way you talk about the zones. A big difference is that, you know, with the Mood Meter, all emotions matter. They're all important, and it's not necessarily about shifting to a certain zone. So it's really about kind of the framework you use to talk about emotions, the colors, and how you define the different zones and colors so that they're consistent and not. And otherwise, it could be a little bit confusing. That's a much longer conversation, but you can email back, get in touch with me, elisa.ladati@yale.edu. I'd be happy to talk more with you about it. I have lots to say, but not as much time as I'd like.
There's another one. They're asking about the research opportunity. Is it okay that they share the research opportunity with parents at their school?
Oh,
Sure.
definitely.
Yeah, that would be great.
And do you have any questions or approaches for younger than elementary school besides the picture of the mood meter?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the question is again. Would you?
So approaches for younger students.
Yeah, even preschool. I mean, we use this with preschool for sure. And when Elisa, she has both a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and she was saying that with the 2-year-old, she just simplifies the number of words that she talks about in each of the quadrants, so that they just kind of get used to certain categories of feelings being associated with the different quadrants. And preschoolers can definitely learn to use it. Sometimes you just talk in shorthand, like I'm in the yellow, or I'm red and I'm mad. So that's just that's a good jumping off point. And then again, like you can just explore, like, well, what does that feel like in your body? And can you show me what mad looks like when you feel mad? And so you just have conversations and explore it. And then also with books is a wonderful way to explore feelings when you're reading storybooks, how the different characters are feeling, and maybe how they, ideas that you might have about what they could do with those emotions that would be useful, and help them solve their problems and have better relationships. So all of those are great ways to work with preschoolers.
There's some questions around the research opportunity. Should they email? Do you want to go back to that slide so maybe they could see the person that they could email?
Sure.
If you just want to jot that down and maybe direct some of those questions there.
They'll be happy so many people are interested.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else?
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay.
So it looks like, all right, we've come to the end. Thank you again, Elisa and Catherine, for sharing.